Hello, and welcome to
Wednesday's Night Out.
with your host, Joseph, Turnpike Plaza 365 Rec Squad.
We will be reading quotes that will change your life, a curated collection of mind-blowing wisdom, edited by Russ Kick. Reality, truth, and such things. Everybody gets so much information all day long that they lose their common sense. Gertrude Stein.
The Dive from Clausen's Pier by Ann Packer. Chapter 9. In Madison, winter went on forever, October to May some years, so long it often felt endless. Winter, the Madison itself, life itself. Spring was a blink of an eye. Fall, a brief, surprising chill. The hottest summers felt short, no matter how hot, how humid. This one, though, July crept by, one scorching day after another. The humidity was unbearable. Leaving the library or the hospital, I thought of the outside air as malevolent. It should have been green, a witch's breath, or the gray of toxic exhaust. Jamie called and called. Did I want to have lunch? Breakfast some morning before work. Dinner? I made excuses until finally she phoned just as I was getting ready to go visit Mike on Friday evening. And when she asked if I picked her up on my way to the hospital, I had to say yes. She was waiting on her porch. "I'm so glad I caught you," she said as she got into the car. And I nodded, then managed to say what needed saying. "Me too." I pulled away from the curb. Last night, Mike had been very quiet, and I wondered how he'd be tonight. In the seat next to me, Jamie sighed, then shifted. I glanced over at her. "So how's work these days?" She answered readily, as if she had material prepared. Work was bugging her. The cashiers complained about the machine operators, and the machine operators complained about the cashiers. Plus, there was this new guy who was kind of cute, but also kind of weird. He had a habit of standing really close to people when he talked to them. "You need to give him an anonymous note about personal space," I said, "or find an article about it and leave him a Xerox in his box." "Yeah, but then he might not stand so close." "Exactly," she said, and we both chuckled, then fell into silence. I didn't want her to ask me any questions, but we were almost there. I was probably safe. "Cute how?" I said. and she spent the next few minutes describing the new guy. His blue eyes, his good shoulders, this one shirt he sometimes wore that she didn't really like. At last, I pulled into the parking lot, and we walked to the entrance without talking. She'd pulled her hair into a French braid that highlighted the pale strand near her face. A running light through a running light throughout the dark blonde twist. As we entered the hospital, she gave me a hopeful little smile that broke my heart. On Mike's floor, the elevator opened onto a wide corridor lined with stainless steel handrails. Just past a cluster of vending machines, we passed a framed poster of an empty wheelchair. As usual, I didn't look at it, and then it looked at it, and then did look at it. A black and white photograph lit from above so that a complicated web of shadow fell from the wheelchair onto the glossy wood floor. "Get moving," read the caption. "That dress," Jamie said, "that's not the one you bought at Luna last winter, is it?" My dress had started life as a long-sleeved black number that fell nearly to my ankles. Cotton and lycra. Not really warm enough for a Midwestern winter, but I liked the deeply scooped neckline and the clothes fit. A few evenings ago, I'd attacked it, cut the sleeves off to tight-fitting caps, and hemmed the whole thing to a couple inches above my knees. In winter, I'd worn a long, skinny cranberry cardigan over it, but now all it needed were some hematite beads. "Sort of," I said. "I thought so," she said. "What'd you do? Shorten it?" Cut off the sleeves. "You're such a busy bee," she said, and I looked away. A few more paces, and we were at Mike's room. Through the doorway, I saw Rooster sitting in the chair Mrs. Mayer usually occupied. It was late enough that she'd gone home. Things between me and Rooster had been a little awkward since the day at the library, almost 3 weeks ago, and I hesitated, but he turned and gave me a friendly wave, and I stepped into the room. Bill was there too, perched on the dresser, the black soles of his Tavis tapping against a drawer front. I hadn't seen him since Christine's going away brunch. "It's a party," Mike said from the bed. He was on his side, propped by pillows. The head of the bed elevated a little. The large form of his body lay inert on top of the blanket. I crossed the room and kissed him, angling my face to avoid the halo. "How are you?" Jamie asked him. "Totally wiped out." I glanced at Rooster. He gave me a half smile, which I took to mean that at least Mike was answering. Rooster'd been present during Mike's silence last night, too. Jamie nodded, then went to stand in front of the dresser near Bill. "Miss James," Bill said to her. "Mr. B." He grinned. He'd gotten a buzz cut recently, and he had a military look about him. An AWOL look, actually given the 3 or 4 day growth of beard on his face. From the far bed, Mike's roommate was looking at me, and I caught his eye and smiled. He was only 14, but he looked even younger. Tonight, his straight blonde hair falling past his ears. His name was Jeff Walker, a horrible joke of a name for a boy who lost the use of both legs in a car accident. Another one for the collection, though, who could bear to add it. Rooster glanced ostentatiously at his watch. "Whoa," he said. "Is it after 8?" I looked at the wall clock. It was 20 after 8. 40 minutes until the official end of visiting hours, though no one would object if we stayed longer. Rooster stretched elaborately and then stood up. He changed from his suit, but not into his casual after-work jeans. He wore a crisp, short-sleeved madras shirt and khakis, and his cheeks gleamed from a recent shave. He looked like a Marshall Fields ad, like a man in a Father's Day lineup. Just going to spend some quality time with my family today. Maybe go out for brunch. "Where are you going?" I said. "Date," he said with a little smile. "Joanne again?" I said facetiously. He nodded. "Are you kidding?" I couldn't believe it, and I glanced around at everyone, trying to figure out what they knew. "Okay, I need a little more information." He raised his eyebrows and smiled mysteriously, then went to stand by Mike's bed. He touched Mike's arm and said, "I've got to run, but I'll see you tomorrow night, okay?" "Watch yourself," Mike said. "You're getting serious." Rooster grinned but didn't respond. "Catch you guys," he said, and he gave us a little wave as he left the room. I stared at Mike. Could Rooster really have gotten involved with Joanne without my knowing it? Could he have gotten involved with Joanne at all? "What's up with that?" I said. "Is this a thing? Isn't she about 30? Mike didn't speak. "Mike, I don't know how old she is." I looked at Bill. "Do you?" "I've never laid eyes on the woman." "Well, he might have told you." Bill said with a grin. "Yes, Rooster. The woman I'm seeing tonight is 30. Thanks for telling me, big guy." Jamie laughed. "Yeah, see," she said. "Better lighten up a little." Jamie laughed. "Yeah." I crossed my arms over my chest. I knew I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't help it. I let out a big sigh, then went and sat in Rooster's chair, Mrs. Mayer's chair, my chair now. Lying on his side across the room, Mike could no longer really see me, and after a moment, I scooted the chair over so I was more in his line of vision. The halo made turning his head impossible, and he'd complained about eye strain. How you never knew how much you turned your neck until you couldn't. I wished I hadn't just been so pushy. Bill told us about his new job, working for a proof from the biochemistry department. The proof was conducting an experiment on fruit flies, and Bill had to slice wings off the dead ones and look at them under a microscope to check for a certain cell change. Mike listened, but after a while it was clear he needed to sleep. I nodded for Jamie to go out with Bill and wait for me in the hall, and I went and sat on the edge of the bed and stroked his shoulder for a while. An orderly would be in soon to get him ready for the night. "I love you," I said before I left, and he stared at me and then looked away. Out in the corridor, Jamie stood waiting by herself. We set off. About halfway to the elevator, we came to the fire stairs, and on a whim, I stopped and pulled open the heavy door, then stepped onto the warm, muggy landing. "This way," she said, coming in after me. For a while, there was no sound but our heels tapping down the concrete steps. The stairwell was dimly lit by bulbs encased in steel cages. A wide red stripe on the wall showed the angle of descent. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. I looked back at her. "For what?" She stopped walking, and I stopped too. "Telling you to lighten up," she said. "Rooster was being completely annoying." "He was, wasn't he?" I shook my head. "Why not just say, yeah, I've seen her a few times. She's really nice." Jamie grinned. "More like, yeah, I've seen her a few times, and I think I'm going to score tonight." "Poor Rooster. He'll manage," she said with a shrug. "He's definitely enjoying the mystery on his one, the little prick." She paused. "Actually, maybe that's the problem." We both smiled. "What is it with him?" I said. "I mean, really." She shrugged. "Same thing as it is with me. A combination of bad luck and bad breath." She gave me a look she'd had a one-night stand with some asshole who'd asked her to brush her teeth before they fucked. One thing about Jamie, in the right mood, she could laugh at herself. She took a step down, then stopped again. "Actually, I'm sorry about something else, too." She hesitated. When we first got here, and I said you were a busy bee, I touched the neckline of my dress. A black hue against my untanned skin shortened the dress. Had been nothing but chopping off the sleeves. Had been a big gamble. It was just right now. A summer dress, freed from too much black stretch cotton. I looked at her. "You weren't making fun of my dress. You were making fun of me." She blushed. "I know I wasn't thinking." "What do you mean?" She shook her head. "Never mind," she said, and our eyes locked for a moment before we continued on our way. I worked. I visited Mike. and I sold and sold. Now curtains for my apartment, and then I throw for the foot of his bed, a red and white checked rectangle that I filled with cotton batting and machine quilted. I was at House of Fabrics so often, one of the saleswomen started calling me honey. My sewing machine was out all the time, sitting at the head of my table. I ate on my couch, bowls of cereal, potato chips, whatever I could pull from a cabinet and consume as is. I drifted through my job so deep into autopilot. Victor started giving me worried looks, coming over and jostling my elbow. If I stood in one place for too long, after my week away, Miss Grafton had brushed off my apologies, but now she seemed leery of me, staying a couple yards away when we had to talk, as if she might catch whatever I had. During the days Mike wore a sweatsuit, the most comfortable thing for physical therapy, loose and unconstricting and easy to adjust underneath him so creases wouldn't press into his skin, start sores he couldn't feel. The jacket had long sleeves, and it hadn't been his bare arms in weeks until I arrived later than usual one evening, after everyone was gone and he'd been changed into short-sleeved pajamas, and found that his forearms had thinned and hardened into the subtle curve of pure bone with nearly the same paleness. I met his eyes and then looked away. I couldn't help myself. I looked at the floor, the window, at Jeff Walker lying half asleep in his bed, the remote for the ceiling mounted TV held loosely in his hand. When I looked back, Mike was looking right at me, his eyes narrowed, his mouth slack with unhappiness, and for a moment I couldn't speak. "Hi," I managed at last, and I crossed to the bed and kissed his cheek. "Sorry I had to work late." He frowned. "You don't have to come every night." "I want to. You know that?" "I don't know why." "I love you. Could that be it?" "You loved me. Now you just feel sorry for me." He stared hard, and I felt he'd toss the remark out to see what it would catch. How persuasively I could deny it. I had a sense that half of him wanted me to fail, so he'd know he was really at the bottom. Yet I felt strongly that it wasn't true, that I did still love him, that since the showdown with Rooster, I loved him, if not more, then better than ever, clearly, without the fog of my own wants, the tedium of needing to be loved back, of needing to be thrilled. Just love, the pure thing, one heart uncurled toward another. That could be enough, couldn't it? "That's not true," I said. "One of these days it will be. You think we're going to have a fun life together. You, me, and my wheelchair." "Mike, don't." I put my hand shoulder. Really, let's just see what happens, okay? It really has happened. It's over. My legs went cold. Us? I said. No, me, he said. Me, obviously. Oh, Mike. I'd been sitting in a chair by his bed, and now I stood and moved closer to him. Against the white sheets, his skin looked pearly gray, a faint flush of emotion coloring his face. His pajamas were the old finished kind, the first real pajamas he'd owned in years, red and navy striped, with navy piping along the collar and at the cuffs. I looked away, and the TV caught my eye, hanging in the center of the room. Before dozing off, Jeff had chosen an old western, and I watched while tiny horses moved across tiny plains. Then a commercial came on, and I felt Mike's attention tune in, too. A couple of bridal cloths came out of a church under a shower of confetti, moving arm in arm. I felt Mike taking it all in, the bride with her radiant face, the groom beaming, the happy people looking on. I think he was actually really worried about something Rooster said. Oh, yes. I turned back to the bed and looked at him, his face cut into separate pieces by the steel of the halo. If his next words were "let's go," a minister over here and get married tomorrow, I would say yes. The Dive from Clausen's Pier by Ann Packer. Turnpike Plaza, 365, Rec Squad.